Have you ever felt invisible, like your sacrifices went unnoticed and your dreams were pushed aside for someone else's? Imagine being married to a man for a decade, helping him build an empire from nothing, only to be discarded for a younger, shinier model. He thinks he's won. He's hosting a lavish charity gala, his gorgeous fiancée on his arm, the king of his castle. He pities you, the quiet ex-wife he left behind. But tonight, the doors of that ballroom are about to swing open. And the woman who walks in won't just turn heads, she'll shatter his entire world. The invitation was an act of cruelty disguised as courtesy. It lay on Amelia Vance's simple, reclaimed wood coffee table, a stark rectangle of ivory cardstock in a minimalist apartment that was the antithesis of her former life. The embossed gold lettering seemed to mock the quiet simplicity she had painstakingly built over the last 2 years. The Thorne Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Marcus Thorne. Her, Marcus. No, not anymore. For 12 years, she had been Amelia Thorne, the silent partner in the meteoric rise of Thorne Capital. She wasn't just the woman behind the man, she was the architect of his internal world. She was the one who calmed his volcanic temper after a bad trade, who edited his speeches until they sang with a confidence he didn't naturally possess, who remembered the names of his investors' children and their allergies. She had managed their sprawling Greenwich estate, hosted flawless dinners, and curated a life so seamless that he never had to think about anything but his own ambition. She had been the scaffolding, and once the building was complete, he had kicked her away. The divorce had been brutally efficient. His lawyers, a pack of sleek sharks in $1,000 suits, had painted her as a simple homemaker, entitled and grasping. They'd argued that her contribution was emotional, not financial, and therefore held little value. Drowning in grief and the shock of his betrayal, Amelia hadn't fought. She took the settlement, a sum that felt insulting compared to the billions he controlled, and vanished. She'd wanted to disappear, to erase the woman who had poured her entire being into a man who saw her as a depreciating asset. She retreated to a small, sun-drenched apartment in Brooklyn, swapping manicured lawns for a fire-escape garden of herbs. She sold the designer clothes that felt like costumes from another woman's life and rediscovered her own uniform, soft jeans, cashmere sweaters, and comfortable silence. And in that silence, an old dream, long dormant, began to stir. Before Marcus, Amelia had been a prodigy, a dual major in materials science and computer engineering at MIT. She'd been fascinated by the intersection of technology and art. She had a theory, a wild idea about weaving conductive nanofibers into fabric, creating textiles that could react to biometrics, change color with a thought, or even generate their own subtle light. Marcus had called it a cute hobby before his own career took flight, and like so many of her own passions, she had dutifully packed it away. But now, with nothing but time and a burning need to build something that was hers alone, she unpacked it. She rented a small lab space in the Navy Yard, pouring her settlement into equipment and research. She called her fledgling company AuraForge, a name that spoke of creating something tangible from an unseen energy. For 2 years she worked with monastic devotion. Her team was small, brilliant, and fiercely loyal. They weren't creating fashion. They were creating a new form of expression. The dress, the one she now called the chrysalis gown, was the culmination of that work. It wasn't just a garment, it was a statement, a living piece of art. Woven from a silk polymer blend threaded with micro-LEDs and biometric sensors, it was designed to shimmer with a soft internal luminescence that subtly shifted with the wearer's heart rate and body temperature. It was a masterpiece of technology and design, a secret she had guarded jealously. The invitation to the gala had arrived a week ago. Her first instinct was to burn it. Why would Marcus invite her? Was it a power play? A chance to parade his new fiancée, Isabella Rossi, a 25-year-old model with porcelain skin and the kind of vacant beauty that looked stunning on Instagram? Was it pity? Did he imagine her showing up in a sensible, off-the-rack dress, a ghost from his past, to make his present look even brighter. Her business partner, a pragmatic, no-nonsense engineer named Ben, had seen it differently. "Don't you see, Amelia? This isn't a slight. It's an opportunity. The theme is the future of philanthropy. The guest list is every venture capitalist, tech billionaire and art patron on the East Coast. They're your target audience. This isn't his stage. You can make it yours." The thought had been terrifying, then electrifying. For 2 years she had been rebuilding herself in the shadows. She had shed the skin of Mrs. Thorne, but she hadn't yet shown the world what, and who, Amelia Vance was. Marcus saw her as a relic of his past. He had no idea she was the architect of her own future. She picked up the invitation, the sharp edges pressing into her fingertips. He thought he was closing a chapter, showcasing his victory. He didn't realize he was giving her the perfect stage for her own debut. She wouldn't go there as Amelia Thorne, the discarded wife. She would go as Amelia Vance, the founder of Aura Forge, and she would wear her creation. The chrysalis gown wasn't just a dress. It was her armor, her declaration, and her revenge, all woven into a single, luminous thread. She RSVP'd yes. The view from Marcus Thorne's penthouse on Billionaires Row was, by any measure, perfect. It stretched from the verdant expanse of Central Park to the glittering spires of Midtown, a kingdom of glass and steel laid at his feet. It was a conqueror's view, and Marcus saw himself as a conqueror. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, a tumbler of 25-year-old Macallan in his hand, the very picture of success. But a quiet, gnawing dissatisfaction coiled in his gut. Tonight was his coronation. The Thorne Foundation Gala was the jewel in his philanthropic crown, an event that cemented his place not just among the rich, but among the important. It was a carefully constructed piece of theatre, and he was the lead actor, director, and producer. Every detail, from the Michelin-starred chef to the guest list, had been vetted to project an image of effortless power and benevolent influence. His fiancée, Isabella, emerged from the bedroom, a vision in crimson silk. The dress, a custom Oscar de la Renta, clung to her flawless figure. Diamonds glittered at her throat and ears. She was breathtaking. She was also, he admitted in the privacy of his own mind, a bit of a bore. Their conversations were a loop of gossip, fashion, and plans for their upcoming wedding in Lake Como. She was the perfect accessory, an exquisite piece of art to adorn his life. But sometimes he felt a pang of something he couldn't name when he looked at her. It was a feeling of profound emptiness. "Do you like it, darling?" she asked, striking a pose. "I thought red would be powerful." "You look magnificent," he said, the words automatic. He crossed the room and kissed her, his lips brushing her perfectly painted ones. Her scent was expensive and floral, but it didn't stir him. It was a perfume, not a presence. He thought, unbidden, of Amelia's scent, a faint mix of old books, chamomile tea, and something uniquely her. It was a scent of comfort, of home. He pushed the thought away. Home was now this sterile, art-filled apartment, 80 floors above the city. He had justified the divorce as a necessary evolution. He had outgrown Amelia. She was quiet, intellectual, content with a simple life. She didn't understand the hunger that drove him. In the early days, her calm had been his anchor. But as his star rose, her steadiness began to feel like a boat anchor, holding him back. He wanted a woman who shone beside him, who amplified his own brilliance. Isabella did that. Her beauty turned heads. Her presence on his arm was a statement. "Look what I can have." Inviting Amelia to the gala had been Isabella's idea, a suggestion made with a flick of manufactured magnanimity. "It will show everyone how amicable everything is," she'd said. "It's very modern, very gracious." Marcus had seen the hidden barb in the suggestion. It wasn't about grace, it was about victory. It was a chance for Isabella to mark her territory, to stand beside him while his mousy ex-wife looked on from the sidelines. He'd agreed, driven by a flicker of his own cruelty. He wanted Amelia to see it all, the success, the new love, the life he had built after shedding her. He pictured her in a corner, looking slightly lost, and felt a vindictive sort of pity. Poor Amelia, she just couldn't keep up. "Is everything ready?" Isabella asked, adjusting a diamond earring. "Everything is perfect," he assured her. "Tonight, we raise 5 million for the children's literacy program, and we announce the new wing of the museum. His museum, his legacy." But the dissatisfaction remained. He had everything he'd ever wanted. The money, the power, the beautiful woman, yet he felt a fraudulence that haunted his quiet moments. He was playing the part of Marcus Thorne, the great man. Amelia had been the only person who had seen the insecure, ambitious boy he'd once been. She had known him. Isabella knew his credit card limit and his preferred brand of scotch. The difference was vast and terrifying. He drained his glass. "The car is waiting. Let's not be late for our own party." As they descended in the private elevator, he glanced at their reflection in the polished bronze doors. They were a perfect couple, a portrait of modern success. But as he looked closer, he saw the faint lines of stress around his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw. He saw a man in a gilded cage of his own making, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, he wished he could go back. Back to the small apartment they'd shared, filled with second-hand furniture and Amelia's laughter, where his only ambition had been to make her happy. But that man was gone. He had traded him for this one, the king of a cold and lonely kingdom. The final hours before the gala were a quiet storm of preparation in Amelia's apartment. Ben had arrived with the gown, carrying it in a climate-controlled biometric-locked case that looked like something out of a spy movie. There was no glam squad, no chattering stylists. There was only Ben, Amelia, and the dress. "All systems are nominal," Ben said, his voice betraying a rare tremor of excitement as he unlocked the case. "Biometric sensors are calibrated to your resting heart rate. The core processor is fully charged. Amelia, it's ready." He lifted it from its cradle. The fabric, in its inert state, was a deep, matte charcoal, almost like liquid smoke. It didn't sparkle. It absorbed the light, holding its power in reserve. The cut was deceptively simple. A high neckline, long sleeves, a column silhouette that flowed to the floor. It was elegant, monastic, and utterly severe. It was a canvas. "It looks quiet," Amelia whispered, running a hand over the cool, smooth fabric. "That's the point," Ben said. "The magic isn't in the design, it's in you." Amelia took a deep, steadying breath and began her transformation. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the last of her hesitation. She sat at her small vanity, a piece she'd bought at a flea market, and refinished herself. Her makeup was minimal, a flawless base, a sweep of dark eyeliner to define her intelligent grey eyes, and a soft, nude lip. She didn't want a mask. She wanted her own face, just amplified. Her hair, which she'd worn in a simple, practical bun for 2 years, was her one concession to drama. A stylist, Ben knew, a quiet artist who worked with Broadway actors, had spent the afternoon weaving it into a complex, elegant chignon at the nape of her neck, leaving a few soft tendrils to frame her face. It was sophisticated and severe, the style of a woman who was in complete control. Finally, it was time for the gown. It slipped over her skin like cool water. Ben helped her fasten the nearly invisible clasps at the back. For a moment, she just stood there, letting the weight of it settle on her shoulders. It felt like armor. "Okay," Ben said, tapping a command into a tablet linked to the gown. "Let's boot it up. Just breathe normally, Amelia. Let it sink with you." She closed her eyes and took a slow, deep breath. She felt a subtle vibration against her skin, a barely there hum. When she opened her eyes again, the room was filled with a soft, ethereal glow. The dress was alive. The matte charcoal had transformed into a swirling, incandescent nebula of deep blues and purples, shot through with veins of silver. A soft, pearlescent light pulsed from within the fabric, a slow, steady rhythm that matched her own heartbeat. She lifted a hand, and as her body temperature shifted the air around her arm, the colors swirled, a cascade of shimmering sapphire. It was breathtaking. "My God!" she breathed, looking at her reflection in the full-length mirror. She was unrecognizable. The woman in the mirror was not the quiet, supportive wife. She was not the grieving divorcee. This woman was powerful, ethereal. She looked like she was carved from starlight and shadow. The dress didn't wear her. It was an extension of her, a visible manifestation of the fire and brilliance she had kept hidden for so long. "The market value of the integrated tech and the R&D alone is north of $3 million, Ben said, his voice thick with pride. "But the value of this moment, Amelia? Priceless." She thought of Marcus and Isabella. She pictured Isabella's perfect, predictable beauty. She imagined the polite, dismissive glance Marcus would give her. They were expecting a ghost. They were not prepared for a supernova. A wave of pure, cold adrenaline washed through her. The fear was gone, replaced by a crystalline sense of purpose. This wasn't just about showing up. It was about rewriting the narrative they had so carefully crafted for her. They had cast her as a footnote in his story. Tonight, she would become the headline. "There's no jewelry," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The dress is the only statement I need to make." Ben nodded, understanding completely. "The car is here. It's time." As she walked to the door, the gown flowed around her, a silent, shimmering galaxy. The light it cast was soft, but it filled the small apartment, banishing all the shadows. Amelia Vance was no longer hiding. She was ready to step into the light, her own light, and she was going to burn so brightly she would be impossible to ignore. The ballroom at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a symphony of curated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden light over a sea of black-tie guests. The air hummed with the murmur of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the gentle strains of a string quartet. At the center of it all, holding court near the grand staircase, was Marcus Thorne. He was in his element. Isabella, radiant in her crimson gown, was fused to his side, her laughter bright and practiced. He accepted compliments on the event, shook hands with titans of industry, and moved through the crowd with the easy grace of a man who owned the world. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Everything was exactly as he had planned. He had scanned the entrance a few times, a part of him looking for Amelia, morbidly curious to see the pathetic figure she would cut. He imagined her arriving early, lingering awkwardly by the bar. But she was nowhere to be seen. He dismissed the thought. She probably lost her nerve. It was just as the museum director was taking the stage to offer a welcome that a sudden, collective hush fell over the entrance hall. The murmur of conversation didn't just quiet. It ceased, replaced by a wave of stillness that radiated through the room. Heads turned one by one like dominoes falling in slow motion. A collective gasp, soft and incredulous, was the only sound. Marcus turned, an annoyed frown on his face at the interruption. And then he saw her. For a moment, his brain couldn't process the image. Framed in the grand archway was a woman who seemed to be wearing the night sky. She was bathed in a soft, internal luminescence, a halo of deep blues and purples that pulsed with a gentle, hypnotic rhythm. The light shifted and swirled as she moved, a living, breathing constellation. She walked into the room, not with arrogance, but with a serene, otherworldly grace that commanded absolute attention. Every eye was on her, every conversation had died. The quartet's music faltered and then stopped entirely. It was as if a celestial body had entered the room, its gravitational pull warping the very fabric of the event. As she drew closer, recognition dawned on Marcus's face, followed by a tidal wave of sheer, unadulterated shock. His champagne flute slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound silence. It was Amelia. But it was not the Amelia he knew. The quiet, bookish woman who favored muted tones and minimal fuss was gone. This woman was a vision. Her face, framed by that severe, elegant hairstyle, was calm, her gaze level and direct. She wasn't looking at him. She was simply observing the room, her presence so powerful it felt like a judgment. Isabella saw the look on Marcus's face, and her smile froze, cracking at the edges. She followed his gaze, and her perfectly made-up face paled. She saw not just a beautiful woman, but a rival on a level she couldn't comprehend. Her red dress, which had felt so bold and powerful moments before, now seemed garish and loud. Her diamonds felt like cheap glass next to the living light of Amelia's gown. Amelia finally let her eyes settle on Marcus. There was no anger in her expression, no pain. There was only a cool, placid calm that was more unnerving than any tirade could have been. She walked toward them, her gown whispering against the floor. The crowd parted for her as if by instinct. "Marcus," she said, her voice clear and steady. It carried easily in the silent room. "Isabella, you both look well." Marcus struggled to find his voice. His mind was racing, trying to reconcile the woman he had discarded with the goddess standing before him. "Amelia, what is that you're wearing?" he stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him. A small, knowing smile touched Amelia's lips. "It's a prototype," she said simply. "From my company." The whispers started then, rippling through the crowd. Company, her company, what company? Isabella, attempting to reclaim the narrative, stepped forward, her voice a little too high. "It's very unique, Amelia. Very bright." It was meant to be a dismissal, but it landed as a desperate plea for relevance. Before Amelia could respond, a man rushed to her side, his eyes wide with excitement. It was Alistair Finch, a notoriously shrewd Silicon Valley venture capitalist. "Vance, you made it!" he boomed, ignoring Marcus and Isabella completely. "I saw the patent filing for Aura Forge's reactive textiles last month. It's revolutionary. Is this it? Is this the chrysalis material?" Amelia inclined her head. "The very same, Alistair. I'm glad you approve." The name Aura Forge and the word revolutionary spread through the room like wildfire. Phones were coming out. People were furiously typing into search engines. The focus of the gala had irrevocably shifted. It was no longer about Marcus Thorne's philanthropy. It was about the mysterious, luminous woman who had once been his wife. Marcus watched, frozen, as the most powerful people in the room, his guests, converged on Amelia, their faces alight with curiosity and awe. He was suddenly on the outside, looking in at his own party. He had wanted her to see the world he had built. Instead, she had walked in and casually, effortlessly unveiled a new world of her own, a world so far beyond his comprehension that it made his own empire of money and influence feel small, dull, and utterly insignificant. He looked at the shattered glass at his feet, and it felt like a perfect metaphor for his perfectly constructed reality. The car ride back to the penthouse was a study in weaponized silence. The plush leather interior of the Rolls-Royce, usually a cocoon of comfort, felt like a pressurized chamber. Isabella sat rigid on her side, her crimson dress a slash of anger in the dim light. Marcus stared out the window, the glittering Manhattan skyline a blur of mocking lights. The carefully orchestrated triumph of his evening had not just been spoiled. It had been hijacked, dismantled, and handed to the one person he had written off as a failure. Isabella was the first to speak, her voice tight and brittle. "What was that, Marcus?" He didn't turn from the window. "I have no idea." It was a lie. He knew exactly what it was. It was a reckoning. "No idea?" she scoffed, the sound sharp. "Your ex-wife shows up in a light-up dress, and suddenly she's the second coming of Steve Jobs, and you have no idea? Did you know she had a company?" "No, I did not," he clipped out. The admission felt like swallowing glass. How could he not have known? He, Marcus Thorne, whose entire business was built on knowing things before anyone else. He had investigators who could dig up the deepest secrets of his corporate rivals, yet he had been completely blind to the revolution happening under his nose, orchestrated by the woman who had shared his bed for 12 years. It was a failure of intelligence so profound it made him feel physically ill. Auraforge, Isabella spat the name as if it were poison. By the time we left, Chrysalis Gown was trending worldwide. And your gala? It's a footnote. Stunning tech debut at Thorne Foundation Gala. They're not talking about your 5 million for the children. They're talking about her. The jealousy and fury rolling off her were palpable. But underneath it, Marcus could sense her fear. Isabella's currency was beauty and proximity to power. Tonight, Amelia had displayed a different kind of power. The power of creation, of intellect, of genuine innovation. It was a power Isabella couldn't compete with, and she knew it. She had been rendered irrelevant, a pretty but static painting next to a dynamic, interactive masterpiece. She did it on purpose, Isabella continued, her voice rising. She waited. She knew this was your night. She did it to humiliate us, to humiliate me. This has nothing to do with you, Marcus snapped, finally turning to look at her. The statement was cruel, but it was true. This was about him and Amelia. It had always been about them. Isabella was just collateral damage. The look on her face, a mixture of shock and wounded pride, gave him a momentary bitter satisfaction. He felt cornered, and like any cornered animal, he was lashing out. When they arrived at the penthouse, the silence returned, heavier and more menacing than before. Isabella swept out of the elevator and went straight to the bar, pouring herself a large glass of vodka. Marcus went to his office, the one place he felt in control. He powered on his terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He searched for Auraforge. The results flooded his screen. It was a privately held R&D company. Small, discreet, but with a list of patents that made his breath catch. Reactive textiles, biometric feedback loops, smart fabric integration. The board of advisors included 2 Nobel laureates and a former head of innovation from Google. This wasn't a hobby. This was a technological titan in the making. He found an article in a niche tech journal from 6 months ago detailing Auraforge's mission. It included a photo of the founder, Amelia Vance. It was a simple headshot, but her eyes held a calm determination he hadn't seen in years. He read her bio, MIT-trained materials scientist and engineer. He had forgotten that part of her. He had actively dismissed it. He remembered her talking about her ideas late at night, her face animated with passion. He had patted her on the head and told her to focus on planning their next dinner party. The memory now burned with a new, excruciating shame. The final crushing blow came when he found a list of early-stage investors. Alistair Finch was one, but another name stood out. David Chen, the CEO of an investment firm that had passed on a major deal with Thorne Capital just last year, citing a lack of visionary leadership. Chen had invested $10 million in Auraforge. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the air leaving his lungs. This wasn't just a personal humiliation, it was a professional one. He had underestimated her on every conceivable level. He had discarded what he thought was a simple stone, only to watch it be polished into a diamond that outshone his entire kingdom. Isabella appeared in the doorway, her face streaked with mascara. "So?" she asked, her voice hollow. "What did you find?" He couldn't look at her. "She's not who we thought she was." "No," Isabella said, her voice dripping with a newfound bitter wisdom. "She's exactly who she always was. You just never bothered to see it." She turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the glowing screens that detailed the scale of his miscalculation. The view from his window, once a symbol of his triumph, now felt like a view from a precipice. And for the first time, Marcus Thorne was afraid of the fall. The following morning, Amelia's apartment was filled not with the scent of champagne and victory, but with the familiar, comforting aroma of coffee and toasted bagels. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The chrysalis gown lay inert in its case, once again a quiet, charcoal thing. The magic was dormant, waiting. Ben sat across from her at her small kitchen table, scrolling through his tablet with a grin that threatened to split his face. "We're a verb, Amelia," he said, not looking up. "To pull an aura forge, it means to make a spectacular and unexpected comeback. It's all over Twitter." He rattled off the headlines. Forbes, "The woman in the starlight gown, tech's newest unicorn." Wired, "Beyond wearables, aura forge just made fashion intelligent." Vogue, "The only dress that mattered at the Met." Amelia took a slow sip of her coffee, the warmth of the mug a grounding presence in her hands. She had expected a reaction, but not this. Her inbox was a digital avalanche of emails from venture capitalists, fashion houses, journalists and CEOs. They weren't just interested, they were clamoring, but she didn't feel the triumphant glee she had anticipated. Instead, a profound sense of calm had settled over her. The night hadn't been an act of revenge, she realized. It had been an act of liberation. It was the final, definitive severing of her old identity. Seeing the shock on Marcus's face had not brought her pleasure, only a distant, clinical confirmation of a truth she had finally accepted. He had never seen her at all. "Are you okay?" Ben asked, finally looking up and sensing her contemplative mood. "You're awfully quiet for someone who just conquered the world." "I'm better than okay, Ben," she said, a real smile gracing her lips for the first time that morning. "I'm free. I spent so many years measuring my worth by his perception of me. Last night I realized his perception is irrelevant. It's a broken metric." Her phone buzzed, displaying a name that made her heart give a single, hard thump. Marcus Thorne. She let it go to voicemail. A moment later it buzzed again. And again. "He's persistent," Ben noted dryly. "He's panicking," Amelia corrected. "He's not trying to reach me. He's trying to reclaim control of the story, my story." She felt no desire to speak to him. What could he possibly say? An apology? A demand? An offer? None of it mattered. His voice was a language from a country she no longer lived in. Her future was here, in this sunlit room, with her brilliant partner and a world of possibilities unfurling before them. They spent the day fielding the most critical inquiries, Ben acting as a ruthless gatekeeper while Amelia set the strategy. They turned down 3 major morning shows, opting instead for an exclusive interview with a respected female journalist from the Wall Street Journal known for her deep tech reporting. They ignored the clamoring from the fashion world, deciding to position Auraforge first and foremost as a technology company. "The dress was the proof of concept," Amelia explained, pacing her living room, her mind on fire with plans. "It's not about party tricks, Ben. It's about the applications. Medical-grade fabrics that can monitor a patient's vitals in real time. Protective gear for firefighters that can detect external heat and atmospheric toxins. Search and rescue uniforms with integrated light and location beacons. That's the future. That's the legacy." Ben watched her, his expression full of admiration. He had seen her toil in obscurity for 2 years, driven by a quiet, fierce intelligence. Now the world was seeing it too. The woman he saw now was not the one who had first hired him. That woman had still been shadowed by her past, her confidence fragile. This Amelia stood tall, her vision clear, her voice resonating with an authority that was entirely her own. Late in the afternoon, a courier delivered a small, hand-addressed envelope. It wasn't from Marcus. The return address was a law firm she didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a cashier's check for $2 million. The letter was brief. "Ms. Vance, this check represents the full post-tax value of the settlement I received upon my own divorce. I considered it the price of my silence and complicity. I no longer wish to be silent. Your gown was more than just beautiful. It was a revelation. I believe in what you are building. Please accept this as an anonymous seed investment from one woman who is finding her voice to another who has clearly found hers. I wish you all the success you so richly deserve." There was no signature, but Amelia knew. She looked at the check, then out the window at the sprawling, indifferent city. The money was significant, but the gesture was everything. It was a sign that her light had not just exposed a lie, but had also ignited a spark of truth in someone else. She put the check down on the table. The war with Marcus was over because she had simply refused to fight. She wasn't his opposite. She was a different entity entirely, moving in an orbit he couldn't even map. This was her new dawn, and the sun was just beginning to rise. The fallout from the gala was a slow-motion demolition of Marcus Thorne's world. The first cracks appeared in the media. The fawning post-event coverage he'd anticipated was replaced by speculative profiles of Amelia Vance and Aura Forge. His name was mentioned only in the context of being her ex-husband. The narrative had been stolen from him, and he had no idea how to get it back. At the office, the atmosphere was thick with a new, unsettling deference. His team still followed his orders, but he could see the questions in their eyes. He heard the whispers when he walked down the hall. He, the man who prided himself on his foresight, had missed the single biggest emerging tech story of the year, one that had been germinating in his own home. It made him look not just blind, but foolish. The professional repercussions began a week later. He was in a board meeting presenting a bold new acquisition strategy when his phone vibrated with a call from David Chen. Marcus prided himself on never taking calls during meetings, but this was different. He excused himself, his heart pounding. "David," he said, forcing a casual tone, "good to hear from you. Having second thoughts about passing on our last round?" Chen's voice was cool and devoid of pleasantries. "No, Marcus. I'm calling to inform you that my firm is divesting from the 2 funds we have with Thorne Capital. The paperwork will be with you this afternoon." The blood drained from Marcus's face. It was a massive blow, not just financially, but to his reputation. "David, wait. We can talk about this. What's the issue? Our returns have been stellar." "My issue, Marcus, is one of judgment," Chen said, his voice cutting. "I invest in leaders who can identify and cultivate visionary talent. It's become clear to me that you were sitting on a goldmine of it for over a decade and failed to recognize it. If you can't see the value right in front of your own eyes, I have no confidence in your ability to see it in the market. I'm moving my capital to people with better vision, people like your ex-wife." The line went dead. Marcus stood in the hallway, the phone clutched in his hand, his knuckles white. The insult was so precise, so devastating, it left him breathless. He returned to the boardroom, his face a granite mask. He couldn't show them the wound. He couldn't let them see him bleed. Things at the penthouse were even worse. Isabella had retreated into a sullen, resentful silence. She spent her days shopping with a vengeance, filling the apartment with expensive things as if to build a fortress against her own irrelevance. Their conversations were stilted and transactional. The easy affection between them had evaporated, replaced by a brittle tension. He now saw her not as a beautiful partner, but as another one of his acquisitions, one whose value was plummeting. He continued to call Amelia, but she never picked up. He left rambling messages, his tone shifting from demanding to pleading to conciliatory. He wanted to understand. He wanted to be part of it. He told himself he was trying to make amends, but the truth was uglier. He saw her success, and like everything else in his life, he wanted to own a piece of it. His desperation peaked 2 weeks after the gala. He drove to her neighborhood in Brooklyn, a place he hadn't set foot in for over a decade. He found her apartment building, a modest pre-war walk-up. It was so small. He sat in his car for an hour, watching her window, feeling like a stalker. What was he even doing here? What would he say if she came out? "I'm sorry I crushed your spirit and discarded you, but now that you're successful, can I have some?" He saw her leave the building with the man he recognized from the gala, Ben. They were talking animatedly, laughing. Amelia's face was open and alive in a way he hadn't seen since the first years of their marriage. She looked happy, truly, deeply happy. And she was happy without him. That was the realization that finally broke through his narcissism. Her new life wasn't about him. Her success wasn't a performance for his benefit. He was not the sun she orbited. He wasn't even a distant star. He was just a black hole she had escaped. He started the car and drove away, the carefully constructed facade of his life crumbling around him. He had spent his entire life accumulating things, money, companies, art, a beautiful fiancée, to prove his worth. But he had willingly given away the one person who had valued him for who he was, not what he had. And in doing so, he had lost the only thing that was ever truly priceless. He was Marcus Thorne, the man who had everything, and he had never felt so bankrupt. The meeting was on Amelia's terms, not in a boardroom or a fancy restaurant, but in a quiet, public conservatory at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden. It was neutral ground, filled with life and light, a world away from the cold glass and steel of Marcus's empire. He arrived first, looking diminished. His usually impeccable suit seemed to hang on him. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a restless, haunted energy. When Amelia walked in, dressed in simple linen trousers and a soft silk blouse, she looked like she belonged there, at peace among the growing things. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm not here for you, Marcus," she replied, her tone gentle but firm. "I'm here for me. I needed to do this to close the book. So, say what you need to say." They sat on a simple wooden bench, surrounded by the lush green of ferns and the scent of orchids. For a long moment he just looked at her, truly looked at her, perhaps for the first time. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the quiet strength in her posture. He saw everything he had missed. "I was a fool," he began, the words clumsy, rusty from disuse. "There's no other word for it. I built my life around an image, and I threw away the only real thing in it because it didn't fit the picture." "I wasn't a thing, Marcus," she corrected him quietly. "I was your wife." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of shared history. "I know," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Amelia, for everything, for not listening, for not seeing you, for the things my lawyers said, for believing that my success was mine alone." He finally looked her in the eye. "I see it now. I see you. And I am so, so sorry." Amelia listened, her expression unreadable. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the depths of her grief. She had imagined screaming at him, crying, demanding answers. But now, sitting here, she felt none of that. She only felt a profound sense of peace. His apology wasn't a key that would unlock her happiness. She had already found that key on her own. It was simply an echo from a distant room. "I accept your apology," she said, "not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve to be free of the weight of my anger. I have been for a while, actually, but this is the final step." He looked hopeful for a second. "Does that mean, could we—" She held up a hand, stopping him. "No, Marcus, there is no we. My life is full. I'm building something I love, something that will change the world in ways your money never could. And I'm happy." She stood up. "I need you to understand this. My success isn't your redemption story. It's not a lesson you get to learn from and then feel better about yourself. It's my life. It has nothing to do with you anymore." The finality in her voice was absolute. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict. "What about Isabella?" Amelia asked, a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. Marcus looked down at his hands. "She left last week. She said she didn't want to be a consolation prize." He let out a dry, humorless laugh. "She took the engagement ring. Fair enough. It was the most honest transaction we ever had." Amelia nodded slowly. She felt a sliver of pity for him, a man so utterly alone in the gilded cage he had built. But it was a distant, detached pity. His fate was his own to write now. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said. And with that, she turned and walked away down the sun-dappled path, not looking back. She moved with the light, easy grace of a woman who knew exactly where she was going. Marcus watched her until she disappeared behind a wall of green. He was left alone on the bench, surrounded by the vibrant, indifferent beauty of the garden. He had come here seeking something: absolution, a second chance, a piece of her light to warm his cold world. But he left with nothing but the stark, painful clarity of what he had lost. It wasn't just a wife or a business opportunity. He had lost the best part of himself, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would never get it back. His redemption wouldn't come from her. It would have to come from the long, lonely work of learning to live with the ghost of the man he could have been. Amelia's story isn't just about a dress. It's about reclaiming your own narrative. It's a powerful reminder that your worth is never defined by someone else's inability to see it. She didn't seek revenge. She sought redemption, not from her ex-husband, but for herself, by finally embracing the brilliance she had hidden away for so long. She found her power not in tearing him down, but in building her own world. A world so bright it simply cast his in shadow. This story is for anyone who's ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or left behind. It's for the architects, the dreamers, and the builders who are quietly working on their own masterpiece. If Amelia's journey from heartbreak to triumph inspired you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and be sure to subscribe for more stories of incredible transformation. Let me know in the comments, what did you think of her final choice to walk away?